The months leading up to the wedding were a strange, surreal performance. I played the part of the docile, slightly bewildered bride-to-be, a pawn in a game I didn't understand. I allowed Martha and Celine to drag me to endless appointments with florists, caterers, and designers. I stood silently in fitting rooms for hours, a living mannequin upon which they draped their social ambitions. "No, not that lace, it's far too common," Martha would snap at a trembling bridal consultant. "We need something that speaks of old money, not desperation, even if it's just for show." She would say this without a hint of irony, while I knew to the penny how much debt was leveraged against my father's name. Celine, appointed as my de facto maid of honor, treated the role as her personal showcase. "The bridesmaids' dresses must be a custom shade of champagne," she declared one afternoon, holding a swatch of fabric against her own tanned skin. "Something that won't wash me out. Alara's pallor is a lost cause, of course, but the rest of us can at least look radiant." I would nod, murmur my agreement, and offer no opinions. My compliance was a source of endless satisfaction for them. They saw it as proof of my broken spirit. They didn't see the machinations behind my vacant eyes. While they debated the merits of calla lilies versus orchids, I was making my own arrangements. My meetings took place in anonymous coffee shops in distant suburbs or via encrypted video calls from the privacy of my locked bathroom. My private investigator, a former intelligence agent named Alistair, was a ghost, leaving encrypted USB drives for me in designated library books. The information he compiled was my arsenal: detailed financial records of Jean-Pierre's shell corporations, flight manifests from Martha's secret trips to the Cayman Islands, and a damning portfolio of Celine's petty blackmails against former friends to maintain her social standing. I met the AV technicians for the Imperial Hotel's ballroom in a noisy pub, paying them a bonus in cash that amounted to more than their yearly salary. I didn't just hire them, I bought their absolute loyalty. I gave them 2 media files on a password-protected drive. File A was the saccharine photo montage of Celine's life that Martha had painstakingly assembled. File B was my masterpiece of destruction. They were given explicit instructions on when to play File B, regardless of any screaming or protest from the bride's family. My nights were spent on my hidden laptop, managing my portfolio, and setting up the architecture of my new life. I legally incorporated Phoenix Designs in a different country, established a board of directors made up of reputable international lawyers, and created a trust that would protect my assets from any future legal challenges from my father. I was building my fortress, brick by digital brick. One evening, my father found me in the library, sketching in an old notebook. He hovered in the doorway, a rare look of something akin to guilt on his face. "Alara," he said, his voice tentative, Are you all right with all of this?" It was a pathetic attempt at absolution. He didn't want to know if I was all right. He wanted me to tell him that he was all right, that his decision was the right one. I looked up, my face a carefully blank canvas. "It's what's best for the family," I said, parroting the line he had used on me my entire life. Relief washed over his features, so visible it was sickening. Yes, exactly. You're a good daughter, Alara. You understand duty." He gave me a weak, patting motion on the shoulder and retreated, his conscience temporarily appeased. I watched him go, feeling not anger, but a profound, empty pity. He was a hollow man, and soon his hollow kingdom would be brought to ruin. The day of the wedding arrived, a perfect, sun-drenched Saturday in September. My room was a storm of activity. Hairstylists, makeup artists, and dressers buzzed around me, all under the imperious direction of Martha. Celine was already perfect, her champagne-colored dress shimmering, her hair in a flawless updo. She watched my transformation with a critical eye. "Too much blush," she commented to the makeup artist. "You're trying to make her look alive, not like a clown." "The dress is actually quite flattering," Martha conceded, circling me. "It hides her poor posture." "Now stand up straight, Alara. You'll be representing this family. Try not to look as miserable as you usually do." I stood, I turned. I smiled faintly when instructed. My mind was miles away, running a final systems check on my plan. The technicians were in place. Alistair was an invited guest, posing as a distant family friend there to witness our triumph and act as a liaison if needed. The evidence was primed. My secret bank accounts were active. My new life was waiting. As my father escorted me into the limousine, he pressed a small velvet box into my hand. "From your mother," he whispered, his eyes misty. "She would have wanted you to have it." I opened it. Inside lay a delicate diamond necklace, my mother's favorite. In my first life, Martha had claimed it was lost years ago. Seeing it now, a calculated gesture to manipulate me into sentimental compliance, filled me with a cold, white-hot rage. I clipped it around my neck, the diamonds feeling like ice against my skin. It would be the last thing of my mother's they would ever touch. The Grand Cathedral was a breathtaking spectacle of Gothic stone and stained glass. Every pew was filled. The air hummed with whispered speculation. As the massive organ began to play the bridal march, my father's hand tightened on my arm. His palm was slick with sweat. "This is it," he breathed, more to himself than to me. "This will save us." We began the long walk down the aisle. A sea of faces turned to watch me, their expressions a mixture of pity, curiosity, and morbid fascination. I saw my father's business partners, their faces tight with anxiety, hoping this bizarre union would protect their own investments. I saw the city's socialites, their eyes wide, hungry for gossip. I was the freak show, the main event in the circus of my family's ambition. I ignored them all. My eyes were fixed on the altar. The Archer contingent stood to the left, a stark, silent group in dark formal wear. They were intimidating, their collective presence a palpable force, and at the front, his back to me, stood Caspian. As we reached the altar, he turned. The rumors, the whispers, the cruel jokes, none of it did him justice. He was tall, powerfully built, and his face was a dramatic tapestry of scars and asymmetry. A thick, silvery mark ran from his left temple down across his cheekbone, pulling the corner of his eye into a permanent, watchful intensity. His jaw was strong, but slightly offset, and his skin was unnaturally pale. He was, by any conventional standard, a monster, but his eyes, when they met mine, were not monstrous. They were the color of a storm-tossed sea, intelligent and piercing. There was no emotion in them, only a deep, unnerving assessment. He was looking at me as if he were reading the fine print of a contract. My father placed my hand in his. Caspian's grip was firm and surprisingly warm. We turned to face the priest, and the ceremony began. I spoke my vows in a voice that was clear, calm, and unwavering. When it was Caspian's turn, his voice filled the cathedral, a low, resonant baritone that held no hint of deformity. It was a voice of command, of absolute authority. As he slid the wedding band, a heavy, unadorned platinum ring, onto my finger, his gaze never left mine. It felt less like a wedding and more like the sealing of a pact between two sovereign powers. The reception at the Imperial Hotel was the height of opulence, a vulgar display of wealth my family didn't actually possess. A string orchestra played Vivaldi, champagne flowed from crystal fountains, and a mountain of caviar glistened on an ice sculpture shaped like a swan. Martha and Celine were in their element, gliding through the room, accepting congratulations, their faces flushed with success. My father was already holding court with a group of investors, his laughter loud and brittle. I was seated at the head table, a silent bride on display. The Archer family sat with us, equally silent. They ate little, spoke less, and watched everything with an unnerving stillness. Caspian sat beside me, a formidable presence. He hadn't spoken a single word to me since the vows. The toasts began. My father stood, raising his glass, his speech a rambling, self-congratulatory mess about legacy, family, and new beginnings. He praised Martha's strength and Celine's beauty. He mentioned me only once, a brief, dismissive nod to my daughter Alara, who has today done her duty to this family. The polite applause felt like an insult. Then Martha stood, her smile dazzling. "To the future," she declared. "A future of prosperity and strength, cemented by this wonderful union. We are so thrilled to welcome the Archers into our family." As the applause for her toast began to die down, I stood up. I picked up my own champagne flute, the delicate crystal cool against my fingers. A hush fell over the ballroom. Every eye turned to me. I saw the flicker of annoyance on Martha's face. The bride was not supposed to speak. I, too, would like to propose a toast, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. I turned my gaze to my former family, to the Dubois family, and to the many lessons I have learned under this roof about business, finance, and the high price of a bright new future. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. The giant screens on either side of the stage, which had been showing the endless loop of Celine's life, flickered to black. For instance, I continued, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone, I learned that the most effective business strategy is sometimes simple, old-fashioned fraud. The screens flashed to life. It wasn't a picture, but an audio waveform. A voice filled the room, amplified and crystal clear. It was Martha's voice, from a conversation I had recorded months ago. He's such a fool, Jean-Pierre. Richard signs whatever I put in front of him. When your manufactured investment crisis brings the company to its knees, the bankruptcy will be entirely in his name. We'll be sipping cocktails in Nevis with the emergency funds long before the auditors even notice. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. My father went sheet white, his eyes locked on the screen. He looked at Martha, a dawning horror on his face. She was frozen, her smile gone, replaced by a mask of disbelief. The audio file changed. Now it was Celine, giggling with her mother. I still can't believe it worked. Marrying her off to that freak show is just perfect. We get the Archer money to plug the holes, and we never have to look at her pathetic, mopey face again. Do you think his whole body is scarred? God, I would just die. Celine let out a small, strangled squeak. The socialites she had been charming were now staring at her with open disgust. But audio can be so easily manipulated, can't it? I said into the microphone, my voice dangerously sweet. Visuals are so much more credible. The screens changed again. This time they were filled with documents. Bank statements from offshore accounts in Martha's name. Emails between her and Jean-Pierre, coolly discussing the plan to defraud my father. Scanned copies of forged invoices and contracts. It was the entire criminal enterprise, laid bare for a captive audience of their peers and business partners. My father made a choking sound and staggered back, clutching his heart. The investors he had been celebrating with were now edging away from him, their faces grim. Martha finally found her voice. She lunged toward the stage, her face a contorted mask of rage. Lies! These are all lies! She's a disturbed, vindictive child. Turn it off! Turn it off now! But the technicians, loyal to the last, simply looked straight ahead. The evidence continued to scroll across the screens, undeniable and damning. This marriage wasn't meant to save Dubois Construction, I announced, my voice ringing with the clarity of judgment. It was a fire sale. You were selling off the last asset of a company you had already bled dry and set on fire. The only problem with your plan, I said, looking directly at Martha, is that the asset you were selling was me. The final, crushing blow came not from the screens, but from the man beside me. Caspian Archer rose slowly to his feet. He seemed to grow taller, his presence dominating the entire room, silencing Martha's shrieks. He took the microphone from my hand, his movements economical and precise. My wife is a remarkable woman, he said, his baritone voice cutting through the chaos. He turned his scarred face toward my whimpering, cornered family. She is also, as you can see, a formidable strategist. However, she was not working alone. He gave a subtle nod to a cousin seated at the table. The man tapped a key on a sleek black laptop. The documents on the screen were replaced by a new set, these bearing the crest of the Archer Corporation's Global Security Division. It was my evidence, but amplified, corroborated, and cross-referenced with international banking records and satellite surveillance data. It was my meticulous case, transformed into an inescapable ironclad indictment. The Archer family values privacy, Caspian stated, his stormy gray eyes sweeping across the horrified guests. This value necessitates an extreme level of caution. We do not enter into partnerships, marital or corporate, without conducting the most thorough due diligence. For the past year, my team has been conducting a parallel investigation into the financial affairs of Dubois Construction and its principals. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The evidence my wife presented is entirely accurate. and it has already been submitted to the proper federal and international authorities. Right on cue, the grand double doors of the ballroom were pushed open with force. Two uniformed officers, flanked by two detectives in sharp suits, strode into the room. The crowd melted away from their path. Martha screamed then, a raw, ragged sound of pure animal terror, as she realized there was no escape. Celine collapsed into a sobbing, hysterical heap on the floor. The officers approached them without hesitation, the metallic click of handcuffs echoing in the cavernous room. "You can't do this!" Martha shrieked as they pulled her hands behind her back. "My husband is Richard Dubois. We are important people." But no one was looking at her. They were all looking at my father. He sat slumped in his chair, a broken, hollowed-out man, watching his wife and daughter being led away in disgrace. He had lost everything: his business, his reputation, his freedom, his family, in the space of 15 minutes. His eyes found mine across the room, a desperate, pleading look in them. He was searching for an ally, for a daughter, for some shred of pity. I met his gaze, and I gave him nothing. I felt no triumph, no joy. Just a vast, cold emptiness where a daughter's love used to be. Caspian's hand rested gently on the small of my back, a silent, steadying presence. He leaned down, his voice for my ears alone. "The war is over, Ilara." I looked up at the man the world called a monster. The camera flashes from the frenzy of journalists at the door were glinting off his scar. He looked less like a monster and more like a battle-hardened king. And in his eyes, I saw not the cold assessment of before, but a flicker of something new. Something I had never seen directed at me in my entire life: profound and unconditional respect. In the glittering ruins of the life they had built for me, I stood beside my husband, the architect of my own salvation, and finally, I began to breathe. Caspian escorted me from the ballroom through a private exit, shielding me from the pandemonium with his own body. We stepped out into the cool night air and into a waiting black car, its engine purring silently. The doors closed, sealing us in a cocoon of quiet leather and tinted glass. As the car pulled away from the hotel, leaving the sirens and shouting behind, the tension of the past year finally began to drain from me, leaving a deep, bone-weary exhaustion in its place. We drove in silence for a long time, the city lights a blur outside the window. I didn't know where we were going, and I found I didn't care. For the first time, someone else was driving. "Blackwood Manor is not a prison," Caspian said suddenly, his voice startling me from my reverie. He was looking at me, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "You are not my captive. You are my wife and the lady of the house. You are free to come and go as you please. You are free to do whatever you wish." I processed his words slowly. "What is it you wish, Lord Archer?" I asked, my voice a little unsteady. A long pause followed. "I wish," he said, his voice softer than I had yet heard it, "for you to call me Caspian." Blackwood Manor was not the dark, Gothic tomb of my memory. While its stone exterior was imposing, the inside was a surprising fusion of history and modernity. The vast, echoing halls I remembered from my first life were now filled with light, art, and the quiet hum of activity. The Archer family, once a collection of silent shadows, revealed themselves to be a vibrant, eccentric, and fiercely intelligent clan. There was Caspian's aunt, a world-renowned astrophysicist who would explain the formation of nebulae over breakfast. There was a young cousin who was a cello prodigy, filling the evenings with the melancholic, beautiful music of Bach. There was his father, the patriarch, a quiet man with a brilliant mind for history and strategy, who treated me not with suspicion, but with a deep, approving respect. They were a family of geniuses who had long ago decided that the world's opinion of their appearance was irrelevant. Their curse was a part of their identity, and they wore it not with shame, but with an indifferent, aristocratic pride. They had known of my family's treachery, but my counterattack, its precision and ruthlessness, had earned their admiration. I had not come to them as a victim to be rescued, but as a warrior who had already won her own war. They saw me as an equal. My relationship with Caspian evolved slowly, cautiously. Our marriage was a strategic alliance, but it became something more. He was my confidant and my partner. He listened, truly listened, as I spoke of the lost years, of the stolen designs, of the 1,000 tiny cuts that had almost bled me dry. He, in turn, shared stories of his own, of a life spent under the world's revulsion, of the strength and resilience it had forged in him and his family. He was possessed of a dry, wicked wit and a profound kindness that he reserved for those within his circle. With his encouragement and the full backing of the Archer fortune, I launched Phoenix Designs. He helped me navigate the complex world of international business, his strategic mind proving as formidable in the boardroom as it was in routing my enemies. My first project was a public library in a low-income district, a building of light, glass, and soaring spaces, designed to be a sanctuary of knowledge and hope. It won architectural awards and, more importantly, became a beloved cornerstone of the community. My talent, once a source of pain and theft, was now my power, my voice, and it was celebrated. News of my old family trickled in through the papers. Martha and Jean-Pierre were convicted in a high-profile trial, their faces grim and aged on the courthouse steps. They received lengthy prison sentences. Celine, thanks to a plea deal, served only 3 years. She emerged into a world that no longer wanted her. Her name was a punchline, her reputation toxic. The social media followers vanished, the fair weather friends scattered. The last I heard, she was working as a cashier, her once famous beauty hardened by bitterness. One cold winter afternoon, 2 years after the wedding, I was leaving my downtown office when I saw him. My father. He was standing across the street, a thin, hunched figure in a shabby coat. He looked old and defeated. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with a desperate hope, and he started to cross the street, dodging traffic. My driver moved to intercept him, but I held up a hand. I got out of the car. "Elara," he rasped, his voice rough. "I knew I'd find you. I need to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Please," he begged, his eyes filling with tears. "I made a terrible mistake. I was a fool. I was blind. She manipulated me. They both did. But you're my daughter, my only family left. I have nothing, Elara. I'm living in a rented room. I can't find work. I just need a little help to get back on my feet." I looked at this man who had stood by and watched as my spirit was systematically dismantled. He had not made one mistake. He had made a million small daily choices. He had chosen their lies over my truth, his comfort over my pain, his weakness over his duty as a father. "Help?" I said, the word tasting like ash. "The last time you helped me, you tried to sell me to save yourself. You don't have a daughter. That girl died a long time ago. You saw to it yourself." I got back in the car without a backward glance, leaving him standing alone on the cold pavement. As we drove away, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt the quiet, clean finality of a chapter closing for good. 5 years after my wedding day, I stood on a balcony in Paris, a cool breeze stirring the silk of my evening gown. Below, the city glittered like a fallen constellation. In our hotel suite behind me, the heavy gold Pritzker Prize medallion, the highest honor in architecture, sat on the mantelpiece, its surface reflecting the soft lamplight. The balcony doors opened, and Caspian stepped out, a glass of champagne in each hand. He passed one to me, his fingers brushing mine. He stood beside me, and we looked out at the lights. "You're a long way from that little room in your father's house," he said softly. I leaned my head against his shoulder, the rough fabric of his jacket a familiar comfort. "I had a good architect for my new life," I murmured. He turned to face me, his scarred features silhouetted against the Parisian skyline. To the world, he was still Caspian Archer, the formidable, monstrous magnate. To me, he was just Caspian, my husband, my partner, the kind, brilliant man who had seen the queen in me when I was still living in ashes. "The prize is magnificent," he said, his gaze warm. "But I have always known you were the best. I knew it the moment I saw you walk down that aisle, not like a lamb to the slaughter, but like a general taking the field." "I had to be," I whispered, my heart swelling with a love and peace I once thought impossible. I had a world to conquer. "And now?" he asked, his hand gently tilting my chin up. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. "Now," I said, rising to meet his lips, tasting the sweetness of the champagne and the even greater sweetness of my victory. "The queen is home."